Look at the person sitting across from you. If you are dealing with a classic narcissist, they genuinely believe they are the apex predator in the room. They operate using a completely predictable predatory script that follows a specific cycle: isolate, exploit, and discard. They constantly scan their environment for warmth, openness, and deep empathy, viewing these exact traits as structural vulnerabilities in other people. When they lock eyes with a super empath, their internal radar flashes a bright green light. They think they have stumbled upon the ultimate well of emotional supply, a target they can drain indefinitely without any real consequences. However, they are suffering from a catastrophic error in behavioral profiling. What the narcissist fails to understand, and what ultimately seals their fate, is that the super empath is not a victim. They are a rare behavioral outlier. Standard empathy is reactive. It simply feels what others feel, absorbing the emotional blows along the way. Super empathy, on the other hand, is highly perceptive, deeply analytical, and acutely aware of everything happening around it. While the narcissist believes they are successfully playing their game of manipulation, the super empath is quietly executing a passive data collection phase. They notice the subtle micro expressions. They spot the inconsistencies in syntax. They map the fragile, wounded ego hidden beneath the grandiose mask. They end up understanding the narcissist's psychological architecture far better than the narcissist understands it themselves. The narcissist enters this dynamic with a sense of absolute control, completely blind to the fact that they have walked right into an emotional trap of their own making. They believe their eventual, inevitable betrayal will break the empath just as it has broken so many others before them. They anticipate the tears, the pleading, and the desperate attempts to fix the relationship. These are the exact emotional reactions that feed their fragile sense of superiority. They have no idea that this specific betrayal is the exact trigger that alters the empath's entire operating system. Right now, we are going to deconstruct exactly what happens when that betrayal occurs. You will see the precise mechanical failure that takes place inside a narcissist's mind when their predatory script flips directly against them. We are going to look at the cold, hard behavioral science of why this specific mistake does not just hurt the narcissist, but permanently dismantles their psychological framework, leaving them entirely unable to rebuild the illusion of control they spent a lifetime creating. If you have ever wondered why a narcissist seems utterly terrified of, yet deeply obsessed with, the one person they could never truly break, pay very close attention to the mechanics of this shift. Every predator operates under the assumption that their environment is completely predictable. For a narcissist, Human beings are not unique individuals. They are merely variables to be managed and resources to be harvested. They actively search for high-value targets, looking for people with deep emotional reservoirs who possess an extraordinary capacity to care. When a narcissist encounters a super empath, they believe they have hit the jackpot. They see the profound kindness, the deep intuition, and the relentless willingness to understand others. And they immediately categorize all of it as compliance. They think to themselves that here is someone they can exploit without ever facing a single consequence. It is the single greatest operational mistake they will ever make. You see, a super empath possesses a highly specialized psychological framework. Their empathy is not some soft, fragile sentimentality. It functions as a powerful, active radar. While the narcissist is busy running their standard manipulation playbook through love bombing, subtle gaslighting, and manufactured crises, the super empath is busy processing the data. They are not just feeling the narcissist's energy. They are reading it with extreme precision. They observe the slight hesitation right before a forced smile. They track the sudden shift in vocal tone whenever control is threatened. Because the super empath operates from a place of radical authenticity, they can spot a counterfeit persona almost instantly. Yet for a long time, they choose to extend grace anyway. They offer genuine understanding, hoping to connect with the fractured human being hidden beneath all that armor. The narcissist completely mistakes this patience for weakness. They grow arrogant and overly confident. They begin to believe their own myth of invincibility. Driven by their compulsive need for validation and dominance, they eventually deliver the ultimate blow. They betray the super empath. It might happen through an act of infidelity, a public smear campaign, or a calculated, cold-hearted discard. The narcissist stands back and waits, fully expecting the emotional fallout. They wait for the panic, the weeping, and the desperate bargaining. They have their response already lined up to maximize the empath's pain. But instead of the expected emotional reaction, they hit a solid wall of absolute freezing silence. The very moment the betrayal is executed, a profound cognitive shift occurs within the super empath. It is a complete systemic shutdown of access. The empathy that once flowed unconditionally is instantly cut off right at the source. This is not an act of explosive anger, nor is it a dramatic form of retaliation. It is something far more terrifying to a predator: total, objective detachment. The super empath stops looking at the narcissist as a partner, a friend, or a loved one. Instead, they begin looking at them purely as a behavioral specimen. Suddenly, the narcissist is completely cut off from the vital emotional supply that sustained their fragile ego. The mirror that once reflected a beautiful, idealized version of them is gone forever. In its place is a flat, unyielding window that sees straight through their lies. When the narcissist tries to provoke a reaction, they are met with calm, unblinking observation. Their gaslighting no longer works because the empath's memory and perception are locked down by rock-solid logic. The guilt trips fail completely because the empath has decoupled their self-worth from the narcissist's opinion entirely. This is the exact point where the narcissist's psychological architecture begins to fracture. A narcissist requires constant control just to maintain their sanity. When they realize they can no longer elicit any emotional response, neither love nor hate, neither joy nor anger, they experience a severe systemic crisis known as narcissistic mortification. They are forced to confront the absolute emptiness of their own core. They try to move on. They try to find new targets to exploit. But the ghost of the super empath haunts their psychological framework indefinitely. Why does this happen? Because every subsequent target feels hollow compared to the immense depth of the supply they lost. More importantly, they carry the permanent, terrifying awareness that there is someone out there who knows exactly who they are behind the mask. Someone who cannot be manipulated and who looks at them not with hatred, but with profound, indifferent pity. By betraying the super empath, the narcissist does not win a game of power. They permanently lock themselves out of the only genuine sanctuary they ever found, leaving their ego broken, exposed, and entirely destroyed forever. To fully understand the sheer magnitude of the tactical error a narcissist makes when targeting a super empath, you have to look closely at the underlying mechanics of predatory profiling. A classic narcissist is, by definition, a behavioral predator. They do not navigate the world through genuine human connection. They navigate it strictly through assessment, leverage, and acquisition. When they walk into a room, their internal radar is actively scanning for specific psychological assets. They look for high-value targets, specifically individuals who possess a deep, almost inexhaustible reservoir of emotional warmth, validation, and psychological resilience. This is what they classify as high-quality supply. When their radar locks onto a super empath, the narcissist's internal system registers a massive positive signal. They see an individual who listens intently, who validates others effortlessly, and who demonstrates a profound capacity for patience and understanding. To the superficial analytical framework of the narcissist, these traits are immediately cataloged as structural vulnerabilities. They look at the empath's willingness to give, their open body language, and their natural inclination to look for the good in people. They misinterpret this entire psychological profile as a complete lack of boundaries. They assume that because this person is gentle, they must be weak. They assume that because this person offers grace, they lack the basic capacity for self-defense. This is a fatal miscalculation in their profiling matrix. What the narcissist fails to grasp is the clear distinction between ordinary emotional reactivity and conscious emotional intelligence. Standard empathy can sometimes operate as a liability. It can be overly reactive, easily manipulated by guilt, and prone to absorbing the emotional toxic waste of others. Super empathy is an entirely different operating system altogether. It is a highly advanced, perceptive, and deeply analytical framework. The super empath does not possess weak boundaries. They possess wide, highly conscious boundaries that they choose to lower deliberately out of an authentic desire for true human connection. The narcissist, blinded entirely by their own grandiosity, cannot conceive of a person who is powerful precisely because they are kind. They view the empath's patience not as a conscious choice, but as a compliance mechanism that can be exploited indefinitely. They believe they have found the ultimate target, someone they can slowly isolate, systematically exploit, and eventually discard without ever facing a true counter-strategy. The narcissist enters the dynamic with absolute confidence, completely unaware that they have entirely misread the baseline data. They are operating on the assumption that they are the apex predator in the environment, entirely blind to the reality that the super empath's emotional depth is backed by an equal measure of psychological strength, pattern recognition, and acute observation. The narcissist's arrogance creates a massive blind spot, preventing them from realizing that this illusion of an easy target is actually the entry point to their own undoing. They have inadvertently invited an incredibly sharp, highly resilient psychological force directly into the core of their fragile, manufactured reality. The fatal flaw in the narcissist's strategy is their absolute certainty that they are the only ones running a covert operation in the relationship, while they are busy executing their standard tactical plays, the strategic withholding of affection, the subtle shifts in tone designed to induce anxiety, and the calculated deployment of charm. The super empath is quietly engaging in a highly sophisticated passive data collection phase. This is not driven by malice or a desire to manipulate. It is the natural, involuntary function of a highly advanced empathetic operating system. Standard empathy simply absorbs the emotional climate of a room, but super empathy actively decodes it. The super empath scans the environment with microscopic precision, registering data points that the average person completely misses. They notice the fraction of a second delay before the narcissist mirrors a look of concern. They catalog the slight, involuntary micro-expressions of contempt that flash across the narcissist's face whenever someone else receives praise. They track the subtle patterns in the narcissist's speech, mapping the glaring inconsistencies between their grandiose declarations and their actual day-to-day behavior. Because the super empath operates from a baseline of absolute authenticity, they possess an internal calibration system that immediately flags anything artificial. To them, the narcissist's entire persona sounds like a slightly out-of-tune instrument. Yet, because of their deep capacity for compassion, the super empath does not immediately weaponize this data. Instead, they store it quietly, building a comprehensive psychological blueprint of the narcissist's mind. They map out the exact boundaries of the narcissist's fragile ego, identifying the core wounds, the deep-seated insecurities, and the specific triggers that the narcissist spends their entire life running away from. The narcissist remains completely oblivious to this ongoing intelligence gathering. They look at the super empath's calm demeanor, their attentive listening, and their soft responses, and they genuinely believe their gaslighting is working. They think they are successfully rewriting reality inside the empath's mind, completely blind to the fact that the empath is simply watching the performance, taking mental notes, and understanding the mechanics of the illusion better than the magician performing it. The narcissist is essentially walking around a transparent room, completely exposed, while under the impression that they are hidden behind a one-way mirror. Every lie they tell, every false narrative they construct, and every emotional trap they set is cataloged by the super empath, who is accumulating massive amounts of psychological leverage. The super empath understands exactly what makes the narcissist tick, what drives their desperation, and what lies at the bottom of their bottomless void. By the time the relationship progresses, the super empath has inadvertently acquired the complete master key to the narcissist's internal system, holding a detailed, accurate map of a psychological architecture that is built entirely on a foundation of sand, ready for the moment the dynamic inevitably shifts. The transition from a state of nurturing patience to total absolute detachment is triggered by a singular defining moment, the threshold event of betrayal. A narcissist operates under the assumption that boundaries are completely elastic, believing they can repeatedly push, exploit, and damage a person without ever reaching a point of no return. When they decide to execute a major betrayal, whether it is a calculated public smear campaign, a devastating act of infidelity, or a cold, unprovoked discard, they do so with the expectation of a specific emotional payload. They anticipate a high-volume reaction filled with tears, desperate demands for closure, begging, or intense anger, All of these serve as highly validating forms of negative supply that confirm their absolute control over the target's emotional state. However, when dealing with a super empath, this act of betrayal does not bend the relationship. It permanently snaps the architecture of the connection. The betrayal acts as an immediate, irreversible psychological trigger that instantly alters the empath's internal operating system. In a fraction of a second, the profound, nurturing empathy that the empath previously extended toward the narcissist is completely and permanently cut off right at the source. This is not an emotional reaction driven by spite, vindictiveness, or temporary anger, which are all responses the narcissist knows how to manage and exploit. Instead, it is a clinical, systemic shutdown of access. The super empath's mind recognizes that the narcissist is no longer a damaged individual seeking human connection, but a conscious predator seeking destruction. Consequently, the empath immediately shifts out of the role of the caregiver and into a state of absolute, freezing, objective detachment. The narcissist suddenly finds themselves staring into a completely flat, unyielding psychological mirror. The emotional warmth, the deep understanding, and the relentless patience that once defined the interaction vanish entirely, replaced by a cold, analytical observation.